actually do have two breads that are no sugar, no milk, and no egg.
I saw that
breads.
advertised outside. So what is that? It's just the grain?
Yes, it's just the grain, wheat flour, and
water,
yeast, and sugar.
So that is really old world bread.
Right.
That's pioneer bread.
Right.
Is really what that is.
Yeah. So we want to have things that are healthy as well as the old-timey delicious breads that that people are used to. And
so how many varieties of bread do you actually make here?
we actually can make up to 27 different kinds of bread, but we try to keep on hand at least 12 different kinds of bread at all times.
Plus you have all these cakes and cookies and pies. You saw some delicious pies out there, brownies, all that stuff.
Yes.
Everything's made back here.
Everything's made back here from scratch. Our brownie recipe calls for 5 pounds of sugar, 3 pounds of butter. I mean, it's like dynamite.
Salt rise bread. It's so rare to see it. That's why it sells so well for you, I think. Explain to the audience the difference between salt rise bread and, say, a sourdough or a rye.
The salt rise bread has 3 parts, about 3 days in order to make it into the bread. The first day, you take cornmeal, milk, and baking soda, and you let it, you boil water and you put it together, and then you let it ferment. It has to ferment 24 to 36 hours.
Is that at room temperature we do that?
No, we actually do it inside a small cabinet that
generates some heat.
Generates some heat with a light bulb, 100-watt light bulb, so we get it up to temperature. And the temperature has to be well over 100 degrees in order for it to ferment correctly. You know when it's ready to go into the second stage, when the milk has separated and you see the curdles of milk on the top.
Right.
Then you know that you can mix it into the next stage.
Then you go stage 2.
Stage 2 is flour, yeast, and water, and you let that mix, and then after that mixes with the starter, then you have to let it ferment. There too, again, it has to ferment 24 to 36 hours.
Wow.
After that amount of time, you'll be able to see the bubbles, and it'll rise, and then it'll start to fall. When it starts to fall, you know that that starter is ready to be made into the next stage, which is where we're at today.
Right. We're at stage 3 right now.
Right.
So this bread has been in process now for 2 days.
Right. Actually, almost 3, because it took a little longer for it to ferment and to
where
come.
You needed it to be.
And
wow.
Yeah, that's all of our breads. It is long. All of our breads are made by starters and sponges. We don't make any bread that is a quick, fast, instant yeast bread. The difference between a starter and a sponge, I'm sure you probably already know this, but a sponge is where you take flour, yeast, and water, and you mix it together, and then you let it sit in.
Yes.
We set it in our proofer and let it rise.
As a starter.
Right, and it rises up and it looks like a sponge, and that's why they call it a sponge. And then we bring it back into here, put it in the dough bowl, and then we mix the rest of the ingredients to make it into the bread that we want.
Right. But this is one painstaking, long process. To get it finally up on the table and cut into loaves, you're talking about a long process. And you got to be very careful, like you say, with the process. And I think that's why so few people are doing it. I think that's it. But you see, when you have a labor of love like that and it takes so much time and you put so much effort into it, that's why you get such a great product out.
Yeah. And it has been a learning process, because before I came here to the bakery, I'd never made salt rice before. So I've had lots of blunders where it didn't turn out quite right. And for that, I'm thankful that people are forgiving. So I've had to redo and remake.
But you perfected it. So this salt rise bread was actually being made here when these doors first opened over 100 years ago. You're carrying on that same tradition.
That's exactly correct. When they first came here, John and Louise Fagenstosh came here from Switzerland in 1880, and he was a chef in Switzerland, and she also worked in the culinary part. Anyways, they started the bakery with their 6 boys, and that was one of the breads that they made when they first came here, was the salt rice bread, as well as the sourdough.
So your basic stock and trade now is exactly what it was when those Swiss guys opened up this bakery 100 and how long?
107 years ago.
107 years ago. It's still going strong?
Yeah.
Terrific.
What's so neat is that we actually do it now more like they did it 100 years ago than what they did as time progressed.
Yes.
And they bought new machinery. They bought dough sheeters, dough rounders, dough rollers, and all those kind of more automatic.
Which you don't use at all anymore.
No, we hand cut and hand roll every loaf of bread.
You're back to the 100 years ago.
I am. Let me add some more flour to that.